This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Germany votes in a tight race to pick Angela Merkel's successor. China decries America's suppression of its high-tech industry as Huawei CFO returns home following her release from Canada. And Tunisia suspends its nationwide curfew following an improvement in the COVID-19 situation. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also ahead this half hour. In sports, Ethiopians dominate both the men and women's races at the Berlin Marathon. We begin in Germany, where polls have closed in the race to succeed Angela Merkel as Chancellor in the parliamentary elections that began on Sunday. Exit polls already indicate a tight race, with Social Democrats tied with Merkel's CDU party. Germany has more than 60 million eligible voters. According to the Federal Elections Commissioner, voter turnout was at 36.5% by 2 p.m. local time. At stake is the leadership of Europe's most powerful economy. After 16 years as Chancellor, Angela Merkel will step down once it becomes clear who her successor will be. Well, let's bring you the very latest now. We cross to Ryan Thompson. He's live for us in Berlin. Ryan, good to see you. Of course, polls have closed and Germany and indeed the world are now waiting and watching to see who will succeed Angela Merkel. What is the latest?
Yeah, that's right. Waiting with bated breath. Some of the candidates have come out and spoken, or at least are actively speaking. We're keeping an eye on the CDU candidate, Armin Laschet, who was just taken to the stage about 5 minutes ago. It's not exactly a victory speech, but he's certainly satisfied by the fact that the CDU are neck and neck with the SPD, because for so long it didn't look like this would be the case. It looked like they would be just a little bit behind, but not be able to gain the same amount of support. And in fact, now we are seeing they are tied. SPD at 25% and the CDU at 25%. A little bit earlier, we saw the Greens candidate, Annalena Baerbock, take to the stage. Her message was a bit more simple. She understands that she will likely not be the next chancellor unless there's some miracle in postal voting, but her party is likely to be an important force within the next government. They are likely to be included with their strong showing of support. They are likely to influence the policy and potentially push the next government coalition farther to the left. But just exactly how much say they will have, what policies will be adopted into that government's next platform, that remains to be seen. And that largely has a lot to do with these awkward negotiations that will go on for the weeks and months. Once we have a much clearer result tonight, then the parties will begin to discuss possible options. And as you mentioned, Angela Merkel will stay on in that time period in a caretaker capacity. But the negotiations over what the next government will look like, those are likely to be complicated, and those are likely to be influenced by significantly how much share of the vote these parties have tonight.
And you mentioned, Ryan, that the CDU is looking rather confident this evening. Tell us more about the mood at the various party headquarters.
I would call the CDU mood significantly relieved, because we've really seen the polls shake up at many points during this election cycle. When we look back to March and April, the Greens had a very strong lead. They were surprised after some of these regional elections, and it looked like for the first time ever, not only would they be naming a candidate for the chancellor, but they potentially would actually be able to elect that candidate to the chancellery. They saw their popularity fade when June came around, and Armin Laschet and the CDU quickly rose to the top spot, but he fell out of favorability as the summer waved on. We saw a number of gaffes by him, and he just really struggled to adapt the same voter likability that his party predecessor Angela Merkel had. Finally, as we got into late August and September, the SPD has really shot to the top spot, and that is where we see Olaf Scholz coming into play. So what is the mood at the party headquarters? At the CDU, it is certainly a sense of relief. They are happy to see themselves neck and neck with the SPD. We haven't seen an update or Olaf Scholz take the stage just yet, but we're expecting it potentially in the next hour, potentially right before we get those initial polling data at 8 p.m. local time, 6 p.m. GMT. But the Greens, definitely their message is we are a force to be reckoned with. We will fight to get our party platform for climate change and other social issues into the next government.
Thank you so much, Ryan Thompson. Of course, he's tracking all the developments for us in Germany's election live there from Berlin. Now, this election is being seen as a watershed moment for modern Germany, the first in over 16 years where Angela Merkel won't be on the ballot. With the longtime leader retiring, a new generation of candidates is hoping to replace her. But as Trent Murray reports from Berlin, it may take some time for Germany to adjust to having a new leader.
After more than a decade and a half in power, Angela Merkel has decided to call it a day. The 67-year-old German Chancellor's decision to retire has left a fresh field of new candidates hoping to succeed her. Her leadership at home has been characterised by a calm and cautious approach to governing, avoiding populist platforms and personality-driven politics. That strategy has helped Merkel, a trained quantum chemist, win 4 back-to-back elections. Her signature triangle of power becoming a symbol of stability for many voters. But she has also faced challenges, including internationally. The 2008 Greek debt crisis saw her spearhead Europe's tough implementation of austerity measures, making her a poster woman for the north-south divide that often plagues EU politics. The 2015 migrant crisis became a flashpoint in Merkel's leadership. Driven by memories from her time behind the Iron Curtain in communist East Germany, she decided to welcome refugees fleeing the Syrian war.
Let me simply say that Germany is a strong country, and our intention must be to say, we have achieved so much, we will manage this. We can manage this, and where there is an obstacle, we have to overcome it.
That decision proved controversial and helped see the anti-immigrant AfD party win seats at the 2017 election. The first time the far-right party has managed to enter parliament in modern Germany's history. And while Merkel may have hoped for a quiet final few years in office finessing her legacy, fate would have other plans, with the outgoing leader charged with leading Germany through the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's serious. Take it seriously. Not since German unity, no, not since World War II has there been a challenge to our country where it depends so much on our acting together in solidarity.
In her 16 years, Merkel has worked with 4 US presidents, 4 French presidents and 5 British prime ministers. That long tenure means whoever wins this coming election will have to work hard to step out of her shadow, but also prioritise tackling issues that some critics say were neglected during her 4 terms in office. 31 years after reunification, economic inequality remains a persistent problem in eastern Germany, formerly the Soviet-allied GDR. It's an issue that some experts say wasn't properly addressed by successive Merkel governments.
I see the danger that Germany is drifting further and further apart. If you look at many issues, if you see how people in the East consider the approach to fighting against the pandemic, if you see what people in the East consider to be the most important political issues that need to be resolved. And if you compare that to the West, in the East, for example, environmental issues are not as seen as crucial as in the West. So we actually have 2 Germanys more and more, and we've had them for a long time. And this is quite disappointing after such a long time of actually legally being one country.
Whoever replaces Merkel, their decisions will have far-reaching consequences both at home and abroad, including Europe's relationships with China, Russia and the United States. And as Europe's biggest economy, what happens here matters to households and businesses right around the world. Trent Murray, CGTN, Berlin.
Well, let's bring you some analysis now on the German election and Merkel's time in office. For that, we're joined via Zoom by Zimedene Negatu, the global chairman of Fairfax Africa Fund. He joins us from Addis Ababa. Welcome to the show. Now, of course, the election draws the curtain on Angela Merkel's 16 years in office. What legacy is she leaving behind?
First of all, thank you for having me back on your program. She actually leaves a very big legacy. First and foremost, just from a style perspective, a lot of people describe her as unflappable, focused more on substance than flashy style, which I think would be an apt description of how she operated. But most importantly, if you look at the 4 years of the Trump administration, she was the flag carrier, or she was the leader of the Western liberal democracies. Trump was inward-looking, nativism, isolating Europe and other places. But she said, no, that's not the way to go. She, I think, gave comfort to the rest of the world when the U.S. was withdrawing from engagement from the West, essentially from the rest of the world. I mean, maybe perhaps the Americans were focused on China, but not any other part of the world. She said, that's not the way we operate. And I think she became the voice for the rest of the world. The second thing I think she'll be remembered for, and this is very important, is the 1 million migrants that she allowed to come into Germany a few years ago, primarily from Syria, but from Afghanistan. There was a lot of pressure on her not to do it, but she had the instinct that that was the right thing to do. Again, it's a big, big step for her to have taken despite a lot of opposition. The third thing, I think, from a domestic legacy perspective, is the way she handled the pandemic. I think Germany has done a pretty credible job. It was a little late on the uptake originally, but
Right.
She's managed to, the economy has recovered well. So these are just some of the things. And finally, just from an Africa perspective,
Yes.
I attended one of the events that she did, the Compact, Africa Compact. That was a big step. It needs some work to do, but
Indeed.
at least she gave focus. So
Zimedene, we are almost out of time.
primary-
I just want to touch on one thing very quickly. As Europe's largest economy, Germany does command a significant influence on the global stage. What do you think are the immediate foreign policy issues that her successor will have to deal with? Perhaps just name one for us.
Well, very good point. I think balancing the rivalry between China and the United States, because Germany has a role to play, especially since China is an extremely big market. In fact, the biggest market for German exporters is China. But it has to find a role where the U.S. has taken a very aggressive stance against China. But at the same time, the German economy, even though it's done well, is highly, highly dependent on exports to China. So she has, whoever succeeds her has to find an apt role for Germany between those two superpowers, but also as the world's third largest exporter. They export $1.6 trillion last year. That's a big amount, and a lot of it goes to China. So they have to find a role for Germany in this sort of bipolar world where the US and China are competing for supremacy.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Zimedene Negatu. Do value your insights, joining us there from Addis. You are watching Africa Live. Let's take a short break. Coming up, Tunisia suspends its nationwide curfew following an improvement in the COVID-19 situation. And Rwandan President Paul Kagame calls for support in the fight against Mozambique insurgents. How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there. There's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Huawei's chief financial officer, Meng Wanzhou, has arrived back in China. Crowds cheered as she stepped off the jets in Shenzhen on Saturday night. She left Canada after reaching an agreement with the United States to defer prosecution. Michael Voss reports.
Meng Wanzhou received a hero's welcome on her return to China after fighting extradition to the US for almost 3 years. Huawei's chief financial officer and daughter of the company's founder was finally released and allowed to return home. Miss Meng was detained at Vancouver Airport in December 2018 after a warrant was issued by the United States for a range of charges linked to alleged breaches of sanctions against Iran. It became a major international incident, souring relations between China, Canada and the US.
I'm finally back to my motherland. The long wait overseas was full of struggles, but after I stepped down from the airplane, I can feel the exciting warmth of my homeland.
It was a relieved-looking Miss Meng who left her home Friday on her way to attend what was her final extradition hearing. With the extradition request dropped, a Canadian judge said she was free to return to China. Miss Meng thanked everyone who'd supported her and then spoke of its impact.
Over the past 3 years, my life has been turned upside down. It was a disruptive time for me as a mother, a wife, and a company executive. But I believe every cloud has a silver lining. It really was an invaluable experience in my life.
The Americans never should have started this case in the first place. President Trump used Ms. Meng as a trade pawn in negotiations with China, wrongfully.
Under the terms of Meng Wanzhou's release, she has until the end of next year to meet the conditions set by the court, at which point the US will drop the threat of prosecution altogether. The hope now is that tensions could finally start to ease between China, the US and Canada. Michael Voss, CGTN.
China's foreign ministry has described Meng's case as political persecution aimed at suppressing China's high-tech industry. Late last year, the U.S. Commerce Department added 60 Chinese companies to a blacklist that restricts American firms from exporting technology. In April, Washington announced sanctions against 7 more Chinese supercomputing entities, citing national security concerns. Other executives have been targeted too. Frédéric Pierucci, a former manager of the French energy group Alstom, was arrested in New York in 2013. He was charged with wire fraud and money laundering. He eventually pled guilty and was released from jail in 2018. He claims the company was dismembered by the investigation and accused Washington of economic warfare in the name of fighting corruption. China has meanwhile called on Libyans to put aside their differences and overcome obstacles in support of the political process in the country. The remarks came in a phone call between Libya's president of the Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Menfi, and Chinese State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi. They discussed the future of cooperation between the two nations. Menfi asked Wang to encourage Chinese corporations to participate in Libya's reconstruction. Here's Adel Al-Mahraoui with more.
On the sidelines of the United Nations 76th General Assembly, Wang Yi and Mohammed al-Menfi spoke about the future ties between the two countries. The president of Libya's Presidential Council and the Chinese state councillor discussed how China can support Libya's transition and help revive its economy.
China is a permanent member of the Security Council. Foreign Minister Wang Yi confirmed China's support for extending the UN support mission in Libya so it can continue its balanced and unbiased approach towards Libya's issues, and also to lift the freeze over Libya's financial accounts abroad, which is an issue that greatly concerns Libyans. Overall, China has never taken sides in Libya, and that enables it to communicate with all sides.
During their phone conversation, El-Menfi valued China's support to Libya's Presidential Council and the Government of National Unity, the two UN-backed transitional executive authorities. The Council says that China's policies of non-interference in internal affairs in Libya makes its companies capable of operating in all Libyan territories. Accordingly, the Presidential Council invited China to cooperate in efforts to begin reconstruction after 10 years of war.
Libya wants companies to resume their projects in the nearest time. We're looking for all means to nurture economic life and speed up recovery in Libya. There are many regions that can witness resumption of work, especially in projects that have begun but were suspended. As we move towards elections, we enter a stage that requires economic and political cooperation from our partners, especially China with its diplomatic, political, economic power.
Cooperation between Beijing and Tripoli has continued throughout Libya's decade-long hardships. During the COVID-19 pandemic, China helped Libya with tons of medical supplies and donations and a continuous supply of up to 400,000 vaccines. The two countries have been planning for the future, even during the peak of Libya's civil war. They signed a memorandum of understanding for Libya to be part of the Belt and Road Initiative. Before the 2011 Libyan uprising, China was the top trade partner and the biggest foreign investor in Libya. Back then, at least 75 Chinese corporations were working on 50 projects with investments worth some $18.8 billion. Now Tripoli is moving towards ending its stability with general elections, and it is boosting talks with Beijing, hoping to bring stronger ties in the near future. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Tunisian President Kais Saied has suspended the nationwide night COVID-19 curfew as of September 25th at midnight. The Health Department and the COVID-19 Task Force have approved the new measures, but urged Tunisians to respect the health protocol and prevent the spread of the coronavirus.
The National Commission to Fight Against COVID-19 says that only fully vaccinated people will be allowed to attend or participate in public and private events, activities and gatherings in open and closed spaces. However, they must present proof of full vaccination.
The epidemiological situation is improving in Tunisia. All indicators are decreasing gradually. The number of people at hospitals is going down. There are less patients in ICU, or 50% of the total capacity. There are still patients who need oxygen support. That's why vaccinated individuals can resume a normal life under strict conditions.
Many businesses, especially pubs, bars and restaurants in downtown Tunis, have reopened. The capacity of reception in closed and open spaces has been set at 50%. Tunisian shoppers and clients need to respect physical distancing.
All Tunisian citizens are happy with the end of the curfew. Businesses have been losing money since it was imposed last year. Now people can live a normal life, but they should not forget that the pandemic has not ended yet. Let's stay vigilant to remain safe.
Mask wearing is mandatory in public spaces and transportation for all citizens aged over 6 years. However, many people do not respect this preventive measure.
I just wear the mask in the metro, but I take it off when I'm having fun with my friends at nightclubs. I'm aware that I need to change this behavior and respect the health protocol. Otherwise, the nighttime curfew could be restored and we'd lose our freedom again.
The scientific committee at the Health Department announced that Tunisian and foreign travelers coming from abroad to take part in events, activities and gatherings must be fully vaccinated. Analysts assert that President Zayed's decision to end the nighttime curfew will revive the economic activity in the country. The head of state has recommended to step up the vaccination campaign in coordination with the Health Ministry and the Military Health Department. Adan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Rwandan troops cannot stay in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado forever, says Rwanda's President Paul Kagame. Rwandan troops arrived in Mozambique in July on a mission that was initially meant to last 3 months. But Kagame has said it will be up to Mozambique to determine how long Rwandan troops should stay. Rwandan and Mozambican troops have been recapturing areas from Islamist militants. The insurgency, which has gained in strength since 2017, has displaced almost 750,000 people.
Africa Live. Find your voice.